Video alert. Okay, this is going to be my video on my outlining style. Now, it will also be acting as an instructional video on how to use the outlining worksheets that I made and I have posted on my website. They're available for you to go ahead and download if you want. They're Word documents, so all you'd have to do is go to cswellswrites.com. On the page that says Worksheets and Tools, it's right there. It's just click on the word icon and it should pull it up for you. And then you can have these worksheets that I'm going to be talking about. Now, the first page on the worksheet is titled Preptober Outline, and it says Step 1, the idea. The instruction that it gives on the sheet is just get down the basics of your idea. Now this I'm including is what is your premise and where does your story take place, when does it take place, and who are your characters. So super, super basic stuff. We're not going real in depth at this point in this. Now I went ahead and kind of pre-made an outline using this template so that I can give you examples. I'm going to include a picture right here of the first page. Please forgive me. I know it looks kind of black and white. I have horrible lighting in my house and I had to have the flash on. But I'm going to include a picture of that right here and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Okay. So on the first page of the worksheet, I have what is your premise. Now I'm doing this example based off of a story that I may or may not be doing for Nano, so I won't be going into the whole story when I give this example, but I am going to give bits and pieces so that you can understand how this should be filled out if you're going to follow my method. By all means though, tweak it and do whatever you want with it when you have it. This is just how I work. So I put my premise for this under what is your premise. I put a boy thinks his house is haunted and learns that it's more complicated than that. So one sentence, quick little, like whatever the first thing is that you thought of that made your idea. And then where it takes place is Washington, D.C., and it's mostly taking place inside of his house. And when, I just put an arbitrary date sometime in the future because it's supposed to be set far enough in the future that certain technologies would exist, maybe, theoretically. So I put it as 2073. And then I just put the future. And then my characters that I put on there, I put Max Smith. Now these are just kind of filler names. I haven't really worked on the names yet. But I put Max Smith. Now he is a main character and he is the boy that's being referred to throughout this. That's his name and his role, which goes into the little chart that you'll see on the work sheet there. The next character I have is his father, which is William Smith, and he's kind of a side character. I have his mother, which is Minnie Smith, and she's a side character as well. Like I said, these names are really bad because I haven't done anything with them really yet. I've got Dr. Stamets, and he's a doctor who works for his parents, and he's like an in-house doctor. And then I've got the ghost, who doesn't have a name yet, but he may eventually have one. And he is a main character, and he is a protagonist. I specifically wanted to reference that on my character sheet because typically we think ghosts, they're the bad guys. But this is more, well, I won't get into that. I'm going to go on a rabbit trail, so I won't. But anyway, I've got the last character, and the last character isn't really a character. It's more like a group of people who I haven't fleshed out yet, is the bullies that this kid encounters at school. So that's the extent of the very first page. Step 1, the idea, getting down the basics. The next page that we're going to talk about is step 2, which is the events by chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and post a picture of what that should look like right here. This is how I filled it in. It's usually about 1 to 2, maybe 3 sentences if you absolutely must, just to put kind of the event that happens in each chapter, and you can figure out roughly how many chapters you're going to have. Okay, so hopefully you got a quick look at that. I didn't put it up very long. You don't necessarily want to read my rough draft events on my thing. I am going to read a couple of them to you just to give you an idea, but I'm not going to read through the whole thing because I've got 15 chapter events laid out here, and that would take a while to read, even with them only being one sentence each. So with this step to, oh, by the way, I want to point out the worksheet says one sentence. You can kind of cheat on that a little bit, but try to keep it to 1 or 2 or 3 sentences for each chapter for the event that goes in it. It's going to make more sense when you get to the next step and you have to write a lot more in each one. But I put as chapter 1, boy gets bullied at school because he's a sensitive kid and likes art and is kind of a loner. He goes home and we find out his home life stinks too. So that's kind of like the main point of chapter 1. And then chapter 2, boy sneaks out at night to do graffiti art, but seeing his bullies out there too, he hightails it home trying not to get seen. He gets hit by a car on the way home. And then chapter 3, he wakes up in a hospital, finds out he has a pretty serious injury of some kind. I haven't really gotten into that. I don't know what I'm doing with that yet. And he gets sent home with his parents with that injury. They're rich. I've already established that in my own head that they're pretty rich, and they have an in-house doctor that they decide they want him at home being taken care of there instead of in the hospital. I'll talk more later about other stuff I've fleshed out because that I wouldn't have known at this stage if I hadn't already thought about this more and outlined further than this. But at this stage, this is all I would know, is that he has some sort of injury and he's going home from the hospital with his parents. Chapter 4 is at home. Weird things start happening. Weird movements and things disappearing in the house and being moved around. He wonders if he's going crazy because he has a head injury after getting hit by the car. The weird things in the house start to get worse. This is chapter 5, by the way. Chapter 5, things start getting worse in the house, and he believes the house is haunted. He tells his parents, but they think he's just seeing things because of his head injury, and they call the doctor in, and the doctor wants to give him meds. He doesn't want to take them. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not actually reading exactly what I wrote. I wrote less than that. But he's woken in the middle of the night by a sound in his room. He sees a transparent man messing with his wall. The man acts strange and says, "I was never here. Go back to sleep, kid." Chapter 7 is the man disappears and the kid decides to investigate on his own since his parents would just think that he's crazy. Chapter 8, he ends up finding the man again, and after an awkward moment, they end up talking for a while and find out they get along really well. Now that's through chapter 8. I'm not going to go into the rest of it because I don't want to. This is just already getting to be a very long section. But you get the idea. You just do a real quick summary of what is going to happen in that chapter. 1, 2, maybe 3 sentences if you must. The next section we're going to talk about is the actual summaries, the longer summaries. Now, these I found extremely helpful because technically you could definitely stop at step 2 and then just write from there. But I've tried doing that a bit, and I found that when you're working off of such a not detailed summary, that when your characters start to actually grow and become people, sort of, in a way, like that sounds weird, like kind of Frankenstein-y, but when they start to grow, things will get off in the story and you'll end up not where you wanted to be. Whereas I found that if I do a very detailed summary of each chapter, then I can catch that. And basically, I mean, so detailed, the summary, that it basically is acting kind of like a draft 1, almost. So anyway, I'm going to show you that in a minute. And I'm going to read you just the chapter 1 that I did, since I didn't do any more yet, but to give you an idea of how detailed I'm talking here. But I found that that really helps you to catch when things are going to go off track and to catch mistakes. We're going to talk more about catching mistakes at this stage a little bit more later as well. But I'm going to put up a picture of what that next larger, longer summary page looks like on the worksheet. All right, so on this worksheet, it's titled Summaries and Problems. Just go ahead and ignore the problems part for now. We're going to go over that after I go over the summary portion. Now the instruction on this is summarize each chapter to include the events that were previously mapped out. So you're going to basically be directing the chapter. I mean, like fully figuring out what exactly is going to happen in the chapter. But not necessarily working on writing it in the way that you would write it when you're actually drafting. So I'm going to read this to you as quickly as I can because it's pretty long. I mean, it's over 300 words, the summary for this first chapter. Now, at the top of the page before the summary, it has chapter event, and you go ahead and you cut and paste at the top the chapter event that you had previously mapped out on the other page, just so you have it there for reference. It just makes it really nice and organized, and you can always reference it while you're writing out your summaries. So the chapter event in this one is that the boy gets bullied at school because he's a sensitive kid and likes art and is kind of a loner. He goes home and we find out his home life stinks too. So I'm going to read the summary that I wrote up. Now it's going to be really bad because I wrote it in like 5 minutes earlier today. So bear with me here. And then we're going to go from there. So a kid is getting dropped off at school by his mom while he scribbles in a sketchbook, not really listening to his mom as she's telling him off for something that he doesn't really care about. He gets out of the car and heads to class. He acts very timid and clearly doesn't feel comfortable around the other kids. He takes a roundabout way to class, explaining to the reader that the route he takes is to avoid the bullies, since they usually hang out by the vending machine to steal candy and goodies from other kids after they buy them. He goes to class and explains to the reader that it's English, which he has mixed feelings about. Wow, I've got so many typos in here. It's just, I gotta say. He loves when they have creative writing assignments, but he hates when they have to write about anything controversial. He gets enough politics at home, thank you very much. Sorry, I just think that was funny. School goes by rather uneventfully, and he even got the answer right in a class that he was not paying attention in at all. He was busy daydreaming about what he was going to do that night, referring to the updates he's going to be making to his quote-unquote gallery. And at this point, it kind of doesn't, this isn't in the summary, but it's kind of alluding to the fact that he's talking about this thing, but we don't know what this is yet, that he's talking about his gallery. He gets to go home, and at home he finds that his parents are too busy with work that they brought home. And we find out that they are pretty neglectful, but the kid says he doesn't mind it because it gives him more time to do whatever he wants to do without being bothered by them. He goes up to his room and takes a nap, saying that he needs to get some sleep now since he'll be up later. And that, again, is kind of like foreshadowing. We don't know yet what he's going to be up later. Why is he up, like talking about going and updating his gallery? We don't know what he's talking about at this point. Now, with this, the next step that's kind of part of this one. Ooh, I totally skipped a step. I need to go fix my document and change that on my website before I tell you guys about it. Because I've got these numbered wrong. But the fourth step, which is kind of on the step 3 pages, which is probably why that isn't showing there, is to point out any issues or questions that you have for yourself that you know need to be answered in this particular chapter, or just plot holes that you know are in this chapter so that you can think of solutions. So there is a section at the bottom where you should be filling out at least 3 to 5 questions/issues with the chapter for each chapter. that doesn't sound like fun to have to poke holes in your summaries that you have, but I swear it helps so much in catching them now, so you can think of solutions now, put those solutions into your summaries instead of having big old plot holes once you've actually written the whole thing and then having to fix them, because that's a lot more work than just fixing it in the summaries and then coming back to it. So I'm going to show you how I found issues and questions with this chapter I just summarized for you, and how I found solutions for it and added them in. So the first question I had for myself that I listed here is, if his parents are so busy, how does his mom have time to drive him to work? So kind of an interesting question. It's like, and then the second question was, why should we be scared of these bullies? Shouldn't we know what's so bad about them? And then, what does this kid look like? Because I didn't go into that at all. And then, what kind of cool future stuff would a school have if it's in 2073? So that's something to include. And then, how does he get home? Parents too busy, remember? I put that for myself. But then what I do is, if there are multiple issues in the chapter, I try to pick which one is the most important and which one's going to have the most trickle down, or one or two issues. I don't try to tackle all of them at once. I just try to mainly grab the biggest ones that are going to have the most trickle down into other chapters. So in this case, I picked the issue, why should we be scared of these bullies? Shouldn't we know what's so bad about them? Because that's going to be very important in the next chapter. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the solutions sheet, which is step number, I guess it's kind of like step number 5, because the issues and questions was step number 4. And it's identify the biggest issues in each chapter, and then brainstorm 2 to 3 solutions for each. Now I'm going to put a picture up of what that sheet looks like right here and my example of it, so that you can see what that looks like, and then we'll talk more about that in a moment. I kind of lost where I was at because I got a call from my hubby, and it like interrupted my last take of this, so I kind of lost my place a little bit. But I think we're on step 5, which is solutions. And on the worksheet, I have the chapter number at the top of it. Then below that, I have the issue. You should copy and paste the issue from the previous page where you had the questions and issues written out, and put it there so that you have it there for reference. In this case, I chose the issue for chapter 1 of why should we be scared of these bullies, and shouldn't we know what's so bad about them. And then I put 3 possible ways of including that information so that that's not a problem in that chapter anymore. So the first one I went with is maybe we see them beating up on another kid when Max is sneaking past them. The second one I put is maybe Max reflects on a time when he was beat up by the bullies in the past and really doesn't want to go through that again. And then maybe Max tells us that he's been threatened by them with something awful if they see him at school. Now, what I do is I put these 3 different solutions for a reason, because that way it forces me to think of multiple different solutions, and I don't just hop in with the first thing I think of, because I've had an issue in the past where I've done that, and then it took me down a rabbit trail, and it ended up being problematic. So this way I have 3 different solutions, and I can think about how each one is going to affect the story in the future. Now, in this case, I ended up going with the middle one, the maybe Max reflects on a time when he was beat up by the bullies in the past and really doesn't want to go through that again. That seems to fit best in this chapter. It's going to add gravity to why he really wants to sneak around past the bullies and not get seen by them. I didn't go with the first option, which is maybe he sees them beating up on another kid as he goes past them, because it doesn't really seem like a protagonist-y action where he just kind of watches them beat up on another kid and says, oh well, and then keeps going. And then the third one I could technically combine with the second one, which I'm going to use, which is maybe Max tells us that he's been threatened by them with something awful if they catch him at school. And I could technically add that into the chapter on top of the one that I chose. Now, from here, we're going to talk about the last step that I have in my my outlining thing, and that is integrating the changes that we've made based on the brainstorming into the chapter summaries. So I'm going to show you a picture of what that sheet looks like, and then we're going to talk about how I did that with this particular change to give you an example of how that works. Okay, so with that one, what I ended up doing is to integrate that into the chapter. I literally just went back to that summary sheet where I had the long summary. I found the appropriate place to stick in that detail that would give us what we need when I actually go through and draft it and have all this stuff in it. And that way that's out of the way. And what I wrote into there, I did it in the one paragraph. I'm just going to read the whole paragraph because I had not read this portion to you before that I ended up adding with this correction. And that way you can kind of see how that ended up fitting in there. So the part that I had already read to you is he acts very timid and clearly doesn't feel comfortable around the other kids. He takes a roundabout way to class, explaining that this is the route he takes to avoid the bullies, since they're usually hanging out by the vending machine to steal candy and goodies from the other kids as they buy them. Now, the part that I have not read to you before, which is the part I added to correct that issue, is he brings up a time a few months earlier when he had tried standing up to the bullies when they were picking on another kid, and they had beat him up and dropped his old sketchbook with all his drawings in the toilet, ruining years of art that he could never get back. And that's how I add that in. It makes it it gives me that detail of why he's so adverse to getting anywhere near these bullies. He's obviously had a very bad experience with them in the past. Not only did they beat him up, but they ruined a bunch of his artwork, which is very special to him. That also keeps feeding into the fact that I'm trying to hit very hard that he's kind of artsy and he loves drawing and doing other stuff. And then, so that's adding characterization for him as well as for them. And that kind of stuff. If you'll notice in this summary, I try to add, and I suggest that you do this too, I tried to add little tidbits of world building, tidbits of stuff about what kind of person they are and their character, because if you can do that in the summaries, then the less likely it is that that character is going to hijack the story and go off in a weird direction when you actually get to the drafting phase, because you already know a lot about that character just from the summaries without even doing character sheets yet, which we will get into. That is the end of my outlining process. Now you can add to that, you can do less of it, you can fidget with it, or you can completely ignore it if you want. With that, I'm going to have to go back right now before October 1st when this video comes out and fix something on this worksheet that I noticed is an error so that you don't have to deal with it. So with that, I just wanted to let you know the next thing I will be doing is putting up character sheets, and I will have a video like this that goes along with those as well. That should be significantly shorter because I don't do a ton for my character sheets, but I do some things that I haven't heard other people doing on their character sheets, which you might find interesting. And then after that, I will be doing a world building video that has worksheets that go along with that. Now, the dates for when those will be released are also on my website if you want to check that out. And if you wanted to download these worksheets, go for it. All right, I'm going to let you go because this has been a very long video, and I appreciate you for hanging in with me if you have. And you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.